It's the debut CD for Greg Dodd and the Taildraggers. 3 AM Blues Live, it's called. And to help me talk about that, and we'll find out a bit more about Greg Dodd and the Taildraggers, I have in the studio with me Greg Dodd. Greg, welcome to Blues on the Hill.
Thanks, Baz. How you going, mate?
I am going well. Congratulations on this CD. Before we talk about the Taildraggers, let's just talk a little bit about you. So people say Greg who? Greg Dodd. Tell us a little bit about your blues history, your musical history. How long have you been doing this thing for?
Well, probably about 25 years, I think.
Wow.
With a 10-year sabbatical in the middle.
Okay.
Some people know that, some don't. I started when I was 25, so I was a late starter.
Yeah.
I listened to blues from about the age of 17. Just loved it, couldn't get enough. Went out and saw lots of live acts. Every weekend we'd go out, you know, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday afternoon. We were always going out every weekend and watching blues bands. And I was just hooked, you know. I was like, man, it's all I did was just listen to blues and go out and see it. And I don't know why, but it took about 7 to 8 years before I picked up a guitar.
Okay.
And which was, you know, I don't know why, but anyway, the timing was right. I was just at a party one night and a couple of mates were sitting there jamming on the floor, you know, playing a couple of acoustics, and they're doing something real simple, and I just went, oh wow, you know, it's sort of, you know, like a basic shuffle, and it's like, oh, can you show me how to do that? And they showed me, and then I had to go, and I thought, yeah, okay, I'm going to try this.
Okay, and you were hooked?
Yeah, that was it.
And so early bands?
Wow, early bands. That was, going back, Blues After Dark was a band that I formed. I don't know what year it was.
Okay.
It was a long time ago. My first ever band was a cover band.
Okay.
I started having guitar lessons for about a year when I was 25. And just sort of basic theory, you know, what the chords are and scales and things like that. And not long after that, I saw an ad in the paper, and they wanted a guitarist for I auditioned for a cover band, and I didn't get the job. And I went home that night, and they said, oh, you know, sorry mate, you know, you didn't get the job. And then they rang me the next day, and they must have had a whole heap of duds, other duds that turned up.
All of a sudden you got better, did you?
So they rang me up and they said, can you come back for another audition? You know, we sort of rushed you through it last night, and it was a bit of a bad audition. So I went round to their house this time. It was more casual, and we ran through some songs, and they said, yeah, you know, I think you'll fit in. So I did that, and we played around for about, I think, 6 months to 8 months, and I just couldn't hack it after that. You know, it's just sort of playing old Beatles songs and all sorts of sort of different things, and, you know, Steve Miller songs and stuff from the 80s and 60s and things. And I just went, no, I've got to play blues. Because when I sort of take a solo in a covers band, you sort of got to play it like the song. And I just rip out a blues solo.
you just, the blues were calling. You had to find a blues band.
Yeah, well, people came up to me way back then, and they'd say, you know, mate, why aren't you in a blues band? They must have obviously heard in my playing, and it was really early on. So then I left there and I formed Blues After Dark, and the bass player that's in the Taildraggers was in that band.
Okay, so you've been with him for a long time?
Yeah, known him for a long time. And then I had, what else did I have? I had another band which was called Jake and the Fat Men, because we had Jake Mason, a great keyboard player on the keys, and a great singer that now lives in Sydney, Troy Dwyer, and that was called Jake and the Fat Men. I had another band which was called the Taildraggers.
Ah, so I was wondering where the old Taildraggers.
Yeah, and so I formed this band many years ago, which was just called the Taildraggers, because I've always had a really, it's just a huge thing about the wolf, and his to me just epitomises that electric early sort of Chicago blues, and so, you know, that's where the name comes from. And I just formed a band called the Taildraggers, and Clint was in that band as well, the bass player, with a different drummer, and I had a singer and a harmonica player. And we had, I think we had 3 residencies back then. It was a really good time. We had 3 weekly residencies in that band. And not long after that, I was asked by the great late Dutch Tilders to join his band, which was a bit of a shock because I got to know Dutch through default. I used to do the Monday night sessions at the Windsor Castle in Windsor there. And the guy that used to look after his sound and the PA, his van got stolen one night. And they set fire to the van, I think, and the PA got burnt. I heard about it the next day on Peebs. I used to listen to PBS, you know, the blues shows and things. And so I rang up Helen Jennings, who was managing Dutch at the time, and I said, look, you know, I've got a PA, and I'm a real opportunist like that. It's like, okay, there might be a bit of an opening here, you know. So I rang up Helen. She goes, oh, that sounds great. Can you come down next Monday? And I did that. And that's where I met Dutch. And I've been watching Dutch since I was 18. And, you know, never really met him. And all of a sudden I turned up at the Windsor Castle one night and, you know, set up the sound and that was it. You know, I sat in the corner every night. I was lucky enough to sit there and just watch him play, and I used to study what he was doing and used to go home and sort of, you know, commit it to memory and things like that and write a few notes down. And, you know, as I got to know him, I used to get up and play and jam with him and stuff. And one night we, after, I don't know, maybe 12 months or something, it was a long time after I'd started there, and we got up and we did a tune or two and we had a break and he was talking to the audience and he announced to the audience, he said, you know, would you please put your hands together for my new guitar player in my band? And I didn't know anything about it. And I was like, huh, what are you talking about? You know, I was really shocked. And he just turned around and he said, well, you want to be in the band or not? And I'm like, yeah. And that was it. And so that was around the same time and I started working with Dutch. So I had Dutch and I had the taildraggers going. And pokies were. I did that for about 2 years, I think. Travelled around with Dutch, and it was when
he just brought another level to the Melbourne blues scene, another level of sophistication. I think, you know, introducing brass and that big band sound. It was lacking in Melbourne, wasn't it? Like he really just brought it up to another level.
Well, Dutch. The great thing about Dutch was that on his own he was fantastic. In a duo, he was fantastic. You know, he had a band called the Holy Souls, which was a double bass almost. The great Pete Howland bass. I used to play stick bass, I think, back then. And he had a conga player, Ian Clark, and Luke Keogh, who was the vocalist, the harmonica player in my band, the Taildraggers. He used to play harmonica. So it was sort of like almost a semi-acoustic type country sort of bluesy outfit, and that was fantastic. But then, he'd do all that stuff with brass, and so anything he did was
I love the acoustic. When I play the acoustic album all the time,
yeah,
it's brilliant.
Oh yeah, it's just so good.
Okay, so what about Andrea Marr then?
Oh yeah, well how that happened was after when I'd been with Dutch and the Taildraggers and so forth, pokies started to come in big time. You know, they were taking over a lot of venues, and a lot of pubs and clubs were shutting down live music. And it was really hard to get gigs. They just dried up and people weren't coming out to support gigs. And I remember doing a gig, it was interesting actually. I got asked today what would be one of my worst gigs, and I didn't think about it today, but I just thought about it then. I remember turning up, it was the old Red House in Collingwood, and we played to no one. And anyway, Dutch decided to give it the flick, and he wanted to go solo again and have a bit of a break or whatever. So that, you know, I was pretty disheartened about that. And the following week, I did a gig with my own band and turned up, and there was no one there. And the publican came back. He was in the middle of a wedding, and he came back to do something. I don't know. And he saw, you know, he walked in, and he was not happy, and he just told us to pack up. You know, pack up and go home, you know, this is ridiculous. So we packed up and I went to the bar. I mean, we had a deal, and, you know, wanted to get my money, and they weren't going to pay me, and there's I hung around, and they ended up paying me half my fee, and I got in the car, and I used to live up in the hills, up at Cockatoo, and I remember I was about halfway home. I didn't think about it, I was just about halfway home, and it just came into my brain. I thought, that's it, I've had enough. Snap. I went home that night, went to bed, I woke up the next morning, and I said to my wife, I'm going to give up for a while, I need a break. Sold all my gear, and we moved up to the high country, and I became a farmer for 9 years.
Okay.
Now, I didn't listen to music for 5 years. not one bar of anything, nothing. It
Wow.
was just talkback, ABC, farm talk, and
That affected you that much?
yeah, well, I obviously just needed a break or something, and that's what I do. If I do something, I go head, bang, I just right into it. So I studied farming big time and just, really did that. And anyway, long story short, about 8 years of being away up in the bush, I went down to Bairnsdale, the local big town, and I bought a really cheap Stratocaster and a tiny little Fender amp. I think it was $500 for the both, and I bought it home. And little by little, I got it out, and I just, had a pluck and went, nah, I'm not interested. And I put it back in the wardrobe, and then, 3 weeks later, I'd take it out again, and did that a few times. And then the last time I took it out was like that was it. It never went back in the wardrobe. I went, yeah, I want to do this again. And not long after that, we moved back to Melbourne, and I went down to the MBAS. This is quite a while ago. I think it was about 8 years ago now. Hadn't played for 9 years, and I sort of went to the MS and sort of, started to get up and jam again, and got a feel for what was happening. And I went and saw Dutch, and caught up with him, and caught up with Lloyd Spiegel and a few mates I hadn't seen for a while. And Lloyd said, what are you doing? And I told him. He said, well, I've got a gig next Friday night, come down, get up. I went, oh God, okay. I didn't really own a great guitar or anything. It was a bit of junk.
Yeah.
The next day I went down to the music shop and bought a proper Strat and a great amp, and got up with Lloyd, and I played 2 songs. That was it. And it was just great to be in front of an audience again, playing the blues, and I really dug it, and that was it. I was hooked again. And then Lloyd was good mates with Andrew, and Andrew was looking for a guitar player, and that's how that happened. Lloyd put Andrew onto me, and Andrew rang me, and I auditioned and got the job.
And tasted wonderful success with Andrea Marr, going to Memphis and semi-finalists at the IBC.
Yeah, that was good fun.
Yeah.
Blues challenge, yeah.
So you had that success, but still wanted your own band, still wanted more.
Yeah, the way that came about, diversity's great. And this is my 8th year with Andrew, so it's a long time.
Okay.
And when you're in a band for that long, it's very, very difficult to keep for all of the members, first of all, to stay. We've been pretty lucky like that. The only people that have sort of come and gone are the saxophone players. At the moment, we've got a new sax player that's done, a handful of gigs with us. He's fantastic. Jeff Mead, who plays with Stevie Page. He's just great. And but the core of the band's always been there for about the last 6 to 7 years, which is a real mean feat. It's hard to do.
And one of the busiest bands around too. You're constantly in work.
Oh yeah, we are. But back then it was manic. We were doing 3 a weekend. We were touring all over, doing the major festivals and things. It was fantastic. It was really good. And anyway, I went to Memphis, and that was great. And while I was over in Memphis, I was just sort of thinking about a few things, and I was talking to the drummer, and he said, why don't you do your own band? I'm like, yeah, I've been thinking about that. And when we got back from Memphis, life goes on, and we did a few more gigs, and Andrew decided she wanted to sort of go on a bit of a soul,
the
soul
thing. Hitman,
yeah, which wasn't formed at that stage, but she knew that she wanted to go and do a soul project, and so she went off and did that, and I went off and did a sort of a bluesy, more of a bluesy project, like what I consider straight down the line blues, and it's worked out really good because we still play in the Andrea Marr band, but I still, I go off and do my own thing with my band, and she goes off and does her. So I get my real hardcore blues fix, and she gets her soul funky fix, and then we all come together and do the odd Andrea Marr band gig.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's good.